The man bleeding out on Kim Chang-hee's floor had begged for mercy in 4 languages before the bullet finally shut him up. Shay Martin watched from the shadows of the corridor, her back pressed against cold marble, hand clamped over her mouth to muffle her breathing. She'd bypassed building security 20 minutes ago using stolen credentials, made it to the executive floor, and followed the sound of raised voices to find this, Seoul's most dangerous man, executing someone in his own office while rain battered the windows. She should leave, should run before those guards dragged the body away and found her crouched in the darkness like a coward. Instead, she waited. The guards spoke rapid Korean, gesturing at the corpse. Chang-hee's response was quiet, controlled, the tone of a man giving instructions about dry cleaning, not murder. They bowed and hauled the body toward the service elevator, leaving a dark smear across white marble. The office door remained open. Shay's heart hammered. 3 months of planning had led to this moment. 3 months of surveillance photos, bribed security guards, and cold hatred crystallizing into purpose. She'd come to Seoul for answers about the night her parents died, about the closed casket at her brother's funeral, about the man police said was responsible but couldn't touch. Now that man sat 30 feet away, rolling a gold lighter between tattooed fingers like he hadn't just killed someone. She stepped into the doorway. Chang-hee didn't look up. "You can come in, Miss Martin. I've been expecting you." The blood in Shay's veins turned to ice. He gestured to the leather chair across from his obsidian desk, still not looking at her. "Sit. We have much to discuss." Every instinct screamed to run, but Jamal's face flashed through her mind. Her baby brother's closed casket, the funeral director's apology about the state of the remains, her mother's wailing that still woke her at 3 a.m. Shay crossed the threshold. Up close, Kim Chang-hee was more devastating than the surveillance photos suggested. Sharp cheekbones that could cut glass. A mouth that looked like it had forgotten how to smile. Ink crawled up his neck in elegant Korean script, disappearing beneath the collar of his blood-splattered white shirt. The top 3 buttons were undone, revealing more tattoos and a thin scar across his collarbone. He finally raised his eyes, and Shay forgot how to breathe. They were the darkest brown she'd ever seen, almost black in the dim lighting. They dragged over her face with the slow assessment of a man who'd decided whether someone lived or died 1,000 times before. No surprise, no fear, just cold calculation that made her skin prickle. "You're wondering how I knew you were here," he said in that low, accented voice that had haunted her dreams. "I've known for 6 days, since you bribed Park Ji-woo for the building schematics." A slight pause. "He reports to me." The floor tilted beneath Shay's feet. Let you think you were succeeding. Yes." Chang-hee set the lighter down with a soft click. "You're very good, Shay-si. Former Army intelligence, now a digital forensics analyst. You know how to disappear in databases, how to track financial trails." His gaze never wavered. "But this is my city, my building, my world. Nothing happens here that I don't allow." Rage burned through the fear. "You killed my family. Did I?" The question landed like a slap. Shay's hands clenched. The police say many things. Most of them are lies." He stood, moving around the desk with predatory grace. "Tell me, if I wanted your family dead, why would I leave evidence pointing to myself? Why make it so easy for you to find me? Because you're arrogant, because men like you think you're untouchable. Men like me?" Something dark flickered across his face. "You don't know anything about me. I know you're a killer." "Yes." He stopped 3 feet away, close enough that she could smell cedar and gunpowder. "But I'm not the one who killed your parents." Lightning split the sky beyond the windows. Rain hammered harder. "Liar." Shay stood, bringing them nearly eye to eye. She'd worn heels specifically for this, refusing to be dwarfed by him. I have bank records, security footage, your name on... Forged. Chang Hee moved closer, and Shay's back hit the chair. Your father did owe me money. $3 million he stole after I trusted him with a shipment route. The theft got 12 of my men killed by the Yakuza. His jaw tightened. I went to Atlanta to collect my debt, to talk, not to massacre a family in their home. Then who did? That's what I've been trying to determine for 3 months. He reached past her, pulled a manila folder from his desk. Your father made enemies, Shacy. Dangerous ones. He was playing both sides, me, the Yakuza, the Sinaloa cartel. Someone decided he knew too much. Shay grabbed the folder with shaking hands. The first image showed her father in a warehouse, shaking hands with a man covered in tattoos. The second, bags of cash changing hands. The third made her stomach turn. Her father's signature on documents marked with the Yakuza's seal. No. Her vision blurred. He wouldn't. I'm sorry. And Chang Hee's voice did sound almost gentle. But the man you thought he was, and the man he became, are not the same. She couldn't look away from the photos. Couldn't reconcile her father, who coached her soccer team, who cried at her graduation, with this stranger making deals with killers. Why are you showing me this? Her voice cracked. Because you deserve the truth. Chang Hee took the folder, set it aside. And because I need your help. Shay looked up. Help with what? Finding out who really ordered the hit. He returned to his desk, pulled out another folder, thicker, official looking. But first, we need to discuss your brother. The world stopped, spinning. Jamal's dead. I buried him. You buried an empty casket. Chang Hee opened his phone, tapped the screen, turned it toward her. Your brother is alive, Shay. I pulled him from the wreckage that night. The video showed a young man in a hospital bed, face bruised but unmistakably Jamal. He was thinner, a bandage wrapped around his head, but alive, breathing, reading a book. The phone slipped from Shay's nerveless fingers. Her knees gave out, and she collapsed back into the chair as the world tilted sideways. A sound tore from her throat, half sob, half gasp, and she couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't process what she was seeing. Jamal, she whispered. Oh God, Jamal. Chang Hee caught the phone before it hit the floor, his expression unreadable as he watched her fall apart. Shay couldn't stop shaking. Tears streamed down her face, hot, unstoppable, 3 months of grief pouring out in broken sobs she couldn't control. Her hands trembled so violently she had to grip the chair arms to stay upright. Jamal was alive. Her baby brother was alive, and she'd buried an empty box while he lay broken in some stranger's safe house. Chang Hee said nothing, just watched her fall apart with that unreadable expression, giving her the space to break. Where is he? Her voice came out strangled. I need to see him. Right now. He's safe. Chang Hee's tone remained measured, controlled. He's been in my safe house for 3 months, recovering. Recovering from what? She stood on unsteady legs. What happened to him? Skull fracture, internal bleeding, 3rd-degree burns on his left side. He pocketed his phone. He nearly died, Shay Sessi, but my doctors are excellent. The clinical description made her want to scream. Her baby brother, burned, broken, fighting for his life while she'd stood at his empty grave and believed him gone. Why? The word came out broken. Why save him? Why keep him hidden? Chang Hee circled back to his desk, that predatory grace never faltering. Because I went to your family's home that night to talk to your father, to negotiate repayment. When I arrived, the house was already burning. His jaw tightened. I heard someone screaming inside. I pulled your brother from the wreckage. By the time the fire department arrived, your parents were already dead. Shay pressed her palms against her eyes, trying to hold herself together. The police said, The police found evidence I was there. My DNA, my footprints, easy to spin into a narrative. His voice hardened. Someone wanted me framed for murder. Someone powerful enough to plant evidence and make it stick. Who? That's what I've been trying to find out. He opened the thick folder on his desk. The people who did this think everyone in that house died. They think there are no witnesses. That's the only reason your brother is still alive. The implication hit her like ice water. You're saying if they find out, he's dead within 48 hours. Chang Hee's gaze locked on hers, along with anyone who knows he survived. The threat hung between them. I want to see him, Shay said, forcing steel into her voice. Today, now. No. That's not. You show up at my safe house, someone notices. Word spreads that the brother survived. They come for him, and this time I won't be there to pull him from the fire. Chang Hee leaned forward, bracing his hands on the desk. Is that what you want? I want my brother safe. Then you'll do exactly what I tell you. The command in his voice made her want to throw something. You don't own me. Not yet. He pushed the thick folder across the desk. But I will, as of tomorrow, if you sign this contract. Shay stared at the document. What contract? Marriage. The word dropped like a stone. 1 year as my wife. You play the role convincingly, live in my home, appear at my side for business functions. In exchange, I protect your brother, give you monthly revelations about who really ordered the hit, and provide enough evidence to destroy them when the time comes. The room spun. You're insane. I'm practical. Chang Hee's expression didn't change. I have enemies circling Shacy, rivals who see weakness in my organization after the Yakuza massacre. They're waiting for an excuse to move against me. A wife, particularly an American wife with no ties to Korean crime families, sends a message. I'm not playing their games anymore. I'm building something different. So I'm a political statement. Your protection, for both of us. He straightened. You need me to keep your brother alive and find his attackers. I need you to shore up my position while I hunt them. We both benefit. Or you're lying about everything. Shay's voice shook. That video could be old. Jamal could be dead, and this is just, why would I lie? Something that might have been offense crossed his face. If I wanted leverage over you, there are easier methods than fabricating your brother's survival. Then prove it. Let me see him. After the wedding. No, before. Or I walk out that door and what? Chang Hee's voice dropped to something dangerous. Go to the police. They think I killed your family. You walk into a station with this story, they'll assume you're traumatized. Delusional. He paused. Or working with me. The trap closed around her with perfect precision. You're a bastard, she whispered. Yes. He didn't deny it. But I'm the bastard keeping your brother alive. So the question is, are you willing to sacrifice 1 year of your life to save his? Shay looked at the contract, then at the man offering it. Every instinct screamed not to trust him. But Jamal's face in that video, bruised, bandaged, alive, haunted her. How do I know you won't hurt him? Use him against me? Chang Hee's expression hardened. I don't hurt children. Despite what you think of me, I have rules. You just killed a man. A man who sold children to brothels. His voice went cold. There's a difference between necessary violence and cruelty, Miss Martin. Learn it. The certainty in his tone rattled something loose in her chest. She pulled the contract closer, scanning the terms through blurred vision. Public affection, shared living arrangements, complete cooperation. In exchange, protection, monthly information, divorce after 1 year. I want to see Jamal within 72 hours of signing. Agreed. And at the end of this year, he and I disappear, new identities, clean break. Chang Hee's jaw tightened, but he nodded. Agreed. Shay reached for the pen with shaking hands. This was insane, signing away a year of her life to a man who might be lying about everything. But the alternative, Walking away and never knowing if her brother was alive was impossible. She signed her name, each letter feeling like a vow and a betrayal. Chang Hee took the contract, added his own signature with a flourish. When he looked up, his expression had shifted into something possessive and dark. "The wedding is in 2 days," he said. "I'll have appropriate clothing sent to your hotel. Don't try to run. Don't contact anyone from your old life." His gaze held hers. "As of this moment, you're under my protection. That means you follow my rules. I don't follow anyone's rules." "You will." He stood, closing the distance between them in 2 strides. His hand came up slowly, giving her time to pull away, and caught her chin, tilting her face toward his. "2 days, Shacy. Then you're mine." The possessive edge in his voice sent heat pooling low in her belly, a reaction that made her hate herself. He released her and stepped back, the professional mask sliding into place. "My driver will take you back to your hotel. Sleep well, Mrs. Kim." The name hit her like a brand. Shay grabbed her purse and walked toward the door on shaking legs, refusing to run. At the threshold, she looked back. Chang Hee stood silhouetted against the rain-streaked windows, watching her with those dark, unreadable eyes. She'd just made a deal with the devil. The question was whether she'd survive long enough to break it. "Hi, welcome to Afro-Korean series channel. Thanks for stopping by. We appreciate." The wedding dress arrived at dawn in a black garment bag that probably cost more than Shay's entire wardrobe. She left it hanging on the bathroom door for 4 hours, staring at it like a threat. When she finally unzipped the bag, her breath caught despite herself. White silk that shimmered like water. Hand-embroidered cherry blossoms trailing from shoulder to hem, in threads so fine it must have taken weeks. Traditional Korean hanbok elements blended with a modern silhouette that would have stolen her heart under different circumstances. A note card tucked into the bodice, handwritten in precise English. "For my bride. Wear your hair down. Ch." Shay crumpled the card and hurled it across the room. 2 days. She had 2 days before she became Mrs. Kim Chang Hee, chained to a man she couldn't trust, playing a role she'd never auditioned for. And the only proof her brother was alive was a 20-second video that could have been recorded months ago. Could have been staged. Could have been. Her phone buzzed against the nightstand. Unknown number. "The car will arrive tomorrow at 11:30. Don't run. My men are watching your hotel." Her hands shook as she typed back. "I want to see Jamal first. That was the deal." 3 dots appeared, disappeared. Her heart hammered against her ribs. "After the ceremony. As agreed. I never agreed to marry you blind." The response came faster this time, and she could almost hear the steel in his voice through the screen. "You signed a contract, Shacy. I've upheld my end. Your brother lives, protected in my home. You'll see him after you've upheld yours. The stylist arrives at 10 tomorrow. Be ready." She wanted to throw the phone, wanted to pack her bag and disappear into Seoul's crowds, where his men couldn't follow. But running meant never knowing if that video was real. Meant living with the possibility that she'd abandoned Jamal twice. Once when she deployed overseas, once when fear made her a coward. Shay set the phone down carefully and stared at the dress. "You're doing this for him," she told herself. Just for him. The lie tasted bitter. The stylist arrived with 2 assistants, all business and cool efficiency. The lead woman circled Shay like she was evaluating livestock, tisking at her hair, her skin, her nails. Rapid Korean passed between them. Too fast for Shay to catch more than a few words. One phrase repeated, "Chang Hee-si." His name in their mouths felt invasive. Like he'd already claimed parts of her she hadn't agreed to give. They worked in focused silence. Her natural curls were smoothed into waves that cascaded down her back, loose, touchable, exactly as he'd ordered. Makeup emphasized her eyes with gold and bronze that made her dark skin luminous. When they slipped the dress over her head, it fit like a second skin, custom made. He'd measured her somehow, acquired her sizes without asking. The violation of it settled in her stomach. When they finally left, Shay stood before the full-length mirror and didn't recognize herself. She looked like a bride, like someone in love, glowing with anticipation for the man waiting at the altar. She looked like collateral being delivered. "This is temporary," she reminded her reflection. "1 year. Then you take Jamal and disappear." The woman in the mirror didn't look convinced. The Mercedes arrived exactly on time, black and sleek and obviously armored. The driver said nothing, just opened the door and waited with the blank expression of a man who'd learned not to see things. Shay gathered the silk skirt and climbed inside, her heart a drum against her ribs. Seoul blurred past the tinted windows, markets giving way to high-rises, then quieter neighborhoods where old Korea hid behind modern facades. The car turned onto a private road, lined with cherry trees just beginning to bloom, petals drifting across the windshield like snow. At the end stood a house that made her breath catch. A traditional hanok, but massive. Curved tile roofs and wooden pillars that belonged in a museum, sprawling across manicured gardens with a koi pond that reflected the sky. But security cameras perched between paper lanterns, and the stone walls were too high, too smooth. Beauty fortified into a fortress. This was where she'd live now, this gilded cage. The car stopped, and Shay's door opened. Chang Hee stood on the stone steps in a charcoal suit that transformed him into something otherworldly. His hair was styled back from his face, revealing the full, brutal elegance of his bone structure, sharp enough to cut, beautiful enough to ache. The tattoos on his neck were stark against his white shirt collar. He looked like a king waiting to claim his prize. His eyes met hers, and the air left her lungs. He descended the steps slowly, gaze traveling over her with an intensity that felt physical. When he reached her, something flickered across his face. Surprise, heat, something quickly shuttered. "Beautiful," he said, voice rough. The word landed wrong, too intimate, too real. Shay lifted her chin, forcing steel into her spine. "Where's Jamal?" His jaw tightened, a muscle jumping beneath the skin. "After the ceremony." "That wasn't the agreement. I know what we agreed." He moved closer, and she caught cedar and something darker, earthier. "But there are 30 people inside. Investors, allies, enemies wearing friendly faces. They're here to witness my marriage and report back to those who matter." His voice dropped. "We convince them, or this falls apart. And if this falls apart, Shacy, I can't protect your brother." "You mean you won't?" "I mean I can't." Something almost like frustration crossed his features. "You think I'm the only dangerous man in Seoul? The people who want me dead would love nothing more than leverage over me, the moment they know your brother matters to me. I'm not asking you to put him at risk. I'm asking for proof he's alive." "You'll have it." Chang Hee's hand lifted, hovering near her face before falling. "After you're my wife. After it's too late for you to run." The honesty startled her. Shay stared at him. This man who held all the cards, who'd bought her cooperation with hope and desperation. She wanted to hate him, needed to hate him. But standing here in her borrowed dress, looking up at a face that showed cracks in its careful control, she felt something more complicated than hate stirring in her chest. "I could still walk away," she said quietly. His eyes darkened. "You could." "You sound certain I won't." "I am." He offered his arm, the gesture strangely old-fashioned. "Because you love your brother more than you hate me, and because some part of you knows I'm telling the truth." The worst part was he was right. Shay placed her hand on his arm, felt the muscles tense beneath expensive fabric. His other hand covered hers, warm, possessive, surprisingly gentle. "Stay close to me," he murmured as they climbed the steps. "Some of these people would enjoy seeing me humiliated." "And a reluctant bride would humiliate you?" "A bride who looks like she's being marched to her execution would raise questions I can't afford." They passed through the entrance into a courtyard transformed into something ethereal. White flowers everywhere, their scent almost overwhelming. Silk lanterns casting amber light. "Smile, Shacy. Look at me like you chose this." She turned her head, met his eyes, and curved her mouth into something that might pass for affection if no one looked too close. His breath hitched, barely audible, but she heard it. The guests were a study in controlled observation. Men in dark suits with predator's eyes. A few women in traditional hanbok, their makeup perfect, their smiles empty. They watched Shay with expressions ranging from curiosity to calculation to something that looked almost like pity. One woman, older, elegant, dripping diamonds, leaned to whisper to her companion. Their eyes tracked Shay like she was a curiosity on display. This is his world, she realized. And I'm the outsider he brought home. The officiant waited beside a low table covered in red silk, his face serene and unreadable. Chang Hee led her through rituals she didn't understand, bowing to cups of wine, kneeling on silk cushions, repeating phrases in Korean that felt like shackles settling into place. His hand stayed steady on hers through each movement. His voice never wavered when he spoke vows she couldn't translate, but somehow knew were binding. Then the officiant nodded, and Chang Hee turned to face her fully. The courtyard went silent. "This is when I kiss my bride," he said softly, "just for her." His hand lifted to her jaw, thumb brushing her cheek. "May I?" The question caught her off guard, as if she had a choice, as if 30 witnesses weren't watching, waiting to see if this marriage was real or performance. But his eyes held something unfamiliar, a request, not a command. Every instinct screamed to pull back, to put distance between herself and this man who'd rearranged her entire life with a contract and promises she couldn't verify. But 30 pairs of eyes were watching, and if she flinched now, this whole charade collapsed. Jamal's face flashed through her mind. His smile, his laugh, the way he'd called her sis, like it was her real name. Shay held still, let Chang Hee come to her, hated that her breath caught anyway. "Make it convincing," she whispered. His mouth curved slightly, not quite a smile, but close. "I intend to." Chang Hee's hand slid into her hair, fingers spreading against her scalp, tilting her face up with devastating gentleness. He gave her 1 second to refuse. She didn't. His lips met hers, and the world narrowed to the point of contact. The kiss was nothing like she expected, not brutal or claiming. Soft, almost reverent, like he was handling something precious. His mouth moved against hers with careful heat, and her treacherous body responded, lips parting, heart racing, a sound catching in her throat that she'd deny later. His other hand found her waist, pulling her closer, and she felt the tension in his body, the restraint it took not to deepen the kiss, not to take more than this careful taste. Someone in the audience made an approving sound. Chang Hee pulled back slowly, his breath unsteady, his eyes darker than before. His thumb traced her lower lip, swollen from the kiss, and something possessive flashed across his face. "Convincing enough?" His voice was rough. Shay couldn't speak, could barely breathe. She managed a nod. The guests erupted in polite applause. Chang Hee kept his hand at her waist as they turned to face the witnesses, accepting congratulations in Korean while Shay stood mute beside him, still tasting him on her lips. "This is pretend," she told herself. "Just a performance," but her racing heart called her a liar. The reception finally ended as the sun dipped below the garden walls, casting long shadows across the emptying courtyard. Guests departed with knowing smiles and whispered blessings Shay didn't understand but could guess at from their tone. Chang Hee's hand found the small of her back as the last car pulled away. "Come," he said quietly. "Let me show you the rest of the house." He led her through rooms she'd barely glimpsed during the ceremony. A library with floor-to-ceiling shelves, a kitchen that smelled of ginger and sesame oil, a sitting room where late afternoon light painted everything gold. They climbed stairs to the second floor, and Shay's pulse quickened with each step. Chang Hee stopped at a door near the end of the hallway, pushed it open to reveal a room with silk bedding and windows overlooking the garden. "This is yours," he said. "Your space. No one enters without permission." Relief and something else, disappointment, twisted in her chest. He gestured across the hall to another door, this one slightly ajar. "That's mine." Shay could see a glimpse of darker colors, masculine, furniture, a bed larger than hers. Chang Hee's jaw tightened, and he seemed to be choosing his words carefully. "Tonight, tradition expects certain things. My guests, my enemies, they'll ask questions if we don't." He stopped, started again. "I won't force you. But if we're to make this convincing..." He left the sentence unfinished, but the implication hung between them. Shay's mouth went dry. She thought of those calculating eyes at the reception, the whispers, the way Yang Taiwan had assessed her like a potential weakness in Chang Hee's armor. "For appearances," she heard herself say. His eyes darkened. "For appearances." Neither of them moved. "You promised I'd see Jamal after the ceremony," she said, needing distance, needing air. "When?" "Tomorrow, after you've rested." Chang Hee stepped closer, and she could smell cedar and champagne on his breath. "The doctors say he's stronger in the mornings, more alert." He paused. "We have time tonight, Shacy. No one expects..." "I know what they expect." She lifted her chin, meeting his gaze. "And I know what we agreed to. A contract, a performance, 1 year of convincing lies. The question was, how convincing did they need to be?" Chang Hee's thumb brushed her cheekbone. Barely a touch, but it sent heat pooling through her. "Get some rest. We'll talk tomorrow about expectations." He stepped back, giving her space she wasn't sure she wanted anymore. Shay fled to her room and closed the door, heart hammering. Through the wood she heard him cross the hallway, heard his door open and close. She pressed her forehead against the cool surface and tried to steady her breathing. "It's just for show," she told herself, "just part of the deal." She tried to sleep, couldn't. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw those 30 faces waiting to see if this marriage was real. Yang Taiwan's calculating stare, the woman dripping in diamonds who'd whispered about her like she was a curiosity. If she didn't do this, if she hesitated, if anyone suspected this marriage was a sham, questions would be asked, weaknesses would be exploited, and Jamal would pay the price for her cowardice. For appearances, she reminded herself, for his protection. But when she finally left her room hours later, drawn by something she didn't want to name, she didn't go back to her own bed. She went across the hall and knocked. Shay woke to unfamiliar weight across her waist and the scent of cedar surrounding her. For one disoriented moment, she couldn't remember where she was. Then the previous night came rushing back, the knock on Chang Hee's door, the way he'd opened it already half undressed, the question in his eyes that she'd answered by stepping inside. What happened after burned through her memory in fragments. His hands learning her body, her name rough on his lips, the stunning gentleness of a dangerous man who'd treated her like something precious. It was supposed to be for appearances, a consummation to make the marriage look real. It hadn't felt like pretending. Chang Hee's arm tightened around her, pulling her closer in his sleep. Shay held still, barely breathing, studying his face in the early morning light. The hard edges softened, the permanent tension in his jaw finally relaxed. He looked younger like this, almost peaceful. Her husband. The word settled in her chest with uncomfortable weight. His eyes opened, instantly alert despite the early hour. For a moment they just looked at each other, the intimacy of the night before hanging between them like a question neither knew how to answer. "Good morning," he said quietly. "Morning." Her voice came out rough. Chang-hee's gaze dropped to her mouth and heat flickered in his eyes. For a heartbeat, she thought he might kiss her again. Instead, he released her and sat up, the moment breaking. "I should take you to see Jamal," he said, "all business now. I promised you'd see him after the wedding." The wedding felt like weeks ago instead of yesterday. Shay pulled the sheet around herself, suddenly aware of her nakedness, of the vulnerability of lying in his bed, while morning light exposed everything they'd done. "I'll get dressed," she managed. Chang-hee caught her wrist as she moved to leave. "Shacy," she looked back. "Last night," he seemed to struggle with the words. "I want you to know it wasn't just for appearances," she finished for him. "I know." Something complicated crossed his face. "Do you?" Before she could answer, he released her and stood, giving her his back while he pulled on clothes. The dismissal was clear. Shay gathered her dress from the floor and retreated to her own room, mind spinning. It was one night, she told herself. It doesn't change anything. But as she showered and dressed, avoiding her reflection in the mirror, she knew that was a lie. Everything had changed. She just didn't know what it meant yet. An hour later, they were in his car, driving through Seoul's morning traffic in loaded silence. "He's been asking about you," Chang-hee said quietly. "Every day since he woke up." Her throat closed. "What did you tell him?" "That you were safe. That I was bringing you home." A pause. "He doesn't know about the marriage yet. I thought you should be the one to tell him." The car pulled up to a modern building in a quiet, residential area, nondescript, forgettable, the kind of place that wouldn't draw attention. Security cameras were hidden in the landscaping. Chang-hee's men stationed at subtle intervals. Inside, clinical white hallways gave way to a more comfortable space. Hardwood floors, soft lighting, the hum of medical equipment barely audible. A private facility disguised as luxury apartments. Chang-hee led her down a corridor, past closed doors, until they reached the last room on the left. Through the window, she saw him. Jamal sat propped against pillows in a hospital bed, thinner than she remembered, healing scars visible on his neck and arms, but alive. Reading a book like he used to, lips moving slightly with the words, completely unaware he was being watched. A sob broke from her chest. Chang-hee's hand found the small of her back, steadying, surprisingly gentle. "He doesn't know you're coming. I thought you'd want it to be a surprise." Shay couldn't speak, could barely breathe, through the tears. "Take all the time you need," Chang-hee said, his voice softer than she'd ever heard it. "The doctors say he's strong enough for visitors now." She turned to look at him, this dangerous man who'd saved her brother, who'd married her under duress, who was giving her this moment when he could have held it over her head for leverage. "Thank you," she whispered. Something flickered across his face, surprise maybe, or something deeper. He nodded once, then stepped back. "I'll be outside when you're ready." Shay turned back to the window, wiped her tears, and reached for the door handle. Her hand was shaking. She pushed it open, and Jamal looked up from his book. For one endless heartbeat, he stared at her like she was a ghost. Then his face crumpled. "Sis?" Shay crossed the room in 3 steps and threw her arms around him, careful of his injuries, holding him like she'd never let go. He was real, warm, alive. and for the first time in 3 months, she could finally breathe. She held him until the tears finally stopped, hers and his both. Jamal felt fragile in her arms, too thin, ribs she could count through his hospital gown. But he was warm and breathing and real, and that was enough to shatter every defense she'd built over 3 months of grief. "They said you were dead," she whispered against his shoulder. "The funeral, there was a casket, and they said—" "I know." His voice was hoarse, older than she remembered. "Chang Hee told me. He said it was safer if everyone thought I died in the fire." Shay pulled back, searching his face. The scars were worse up close, pink and puckered across his left cheek, disappearing into his hairline. Burns that must have been agony. "Does it hurt?" "Not anymore. The doctors here are good." He paused, something complicated crossing his face. "He's kept me safe, fed, made sure I had books when I was going crazy from boredom, but that doesn't change what he is." The admission surprised her. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I've seen how his people operate, sis. The men who guard this place, the way they talk when they think I'm asleep." Jamal's hand found hers, squeezed. "What are you doing in Korea? How did you find me?" The question she'd been dreading. Shay perched on the edge of his bed, still holding his hand like he might disappear if she let go. "It's complicated. Chang Hee said you were coming home, that you'd explain everything." His eyes, so much like their father's, searched hers. "What's going on?" Where could she even start? "I married the man I thought killed our parents. I signed a contract that makes me his wife for a year. I'm living in his house, wearing his ring, playing a role I don't understand. I made a deal," she said carefully, "to keep you safe." Jamal's expression shifted, suspicion creeping in. "What kind of deal?" Before she could answer, the door opened. Chang Hee stood in the doorway, his presence filling the small room. He'd removed his suit jacket, rolled his sleeves to his elbows, revealing more of the ink that covered his forearms. The wedding ring on his left hand caught the light. Jamal's gaze dropped to Shay's hand in his, to the matching band on her finger, then to Chang Hee. "No," her brother's voice went sharp. "Sis, tell me you didn't." "It's temporary," Shay said quickly. "1 year, then we're free." "Free?" Jamal tried to sit up straighter, winced. "You married him, the guy who—" He looked at Chang Hee. "You said she was safe. You didn't say she was—" "Your sister understood the situation and made the smart choice," Chang Hee said quietly. "Smart?" Jamal's hands clenched the sheets. "What kind of choice is marry me or your brother dies?" "That's not what happened," Shay interjected, but her voice lacked conviction. Because wasn't it? Hadn't Chang Hee laid out exactly that scenario, dressed in prettier words? Chang Hee moved further into the room, but kept his distance, a predator trying not to spook prey. "Your sister is under my protection now, as are you. The people who set that fire, who killed your parents, are still out there. Until I find them, you both need to stay hidden. Hidden in your house, under your control." Jamal's jaw set in that stubborn way Shay knew too well. "That's not protection, that's a cage. It's survival." Chang Hee's voice hardened. "You want to leave? Walk out of here and see how long you last before they find you. A day, maybe 2? "Stop." Shay stood, positioning herself between them. "Both of you." She looked at her brother, angry, scared, too young to be caught in this nightmare. Then at her husband, controlled, dangerous, watching them both with those unreadable eyes. "Jamal, I know this looks bad, but he saved your life. He's kept you safe for 3 months while I thought you were dead." She swallowed hard. "I can handle 1 year if it means you survive." "And what about after?" Jamal demanded. "What happens when the year is up and he decides he's not done with you?" The question hung in the air. Chang Hee's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind his eyes. "The contract is clear. 1 year, then she's free to go." "Contracts don't mean anything to men like you." "Jamal, no sis. I've been here for 3 months. I've seen how his people look at him, how they follow orders without question. Her brother's gaze never left Chang-hee. You think he's going to just let you walk away after a year of playing house? You're exactly like the rest of them. You just dress it up nicer. Chang-hee's jaw tightened. For a moment, Shay thought he might respond, might defend himself. Instead, he took a deliberate step back. I should go, he said finally. Let you have time together. He looked at Shay, and something in his eyes made her chest tighten. I'll be outside. Take your time. He left without waiting for a response, the door clicking shut behind him. Jamal sagged against his pillows. Tell me you have a plan. Tell me you're not actually going to stay married to him for a year. Shay sank back onto the bed, suddenly exhausted. Through the door, she could hear nothing. No footsteps walking away, no sound at all. She wondered if Chang-hee was still standing there, close enough to hear every word they said. The thought should have made her angry. Instead, it made her feel strangely exposed. I don't know, she admitted to her brother. I just know I couldn't lose you again. Jamal's hand found hers in the dim light. You're not going to lose me, sis, but I'm scared you're going to lose yourself. The words settled into her bones like a warning she couldn't shake. Shay stayed with Jamal until he fell asleep, his hand still wrapped around hers, like when he was little and afraid of the dark. She extracted herself carefully, tucked the blanket around his shoulders, and pressed a kiss to his forehead, avoiding the worst of the scars. I'll come back tomorrow, she whispered, though he couldn't hear her. When she stepped into the hallway, Chang-hee was exactly where she'd imagined him, leaning against the wall opposite the door, arms crossed, eyes closed. He looked almost peaceful in the dim light, the hard edges of his face softened by exhaustion. His eyes opened when her heels clicked on the tile. How is he? His voice was rough, like he hadn't spoken in hours. Asleep, Shay wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold despite the warm air. Angry, scared. She paused. Protective. He loves you. Chang-hee pushed off the wall. That makes him dangerous. Dangerous how? People who love you are willing to do stupid things to save you. His gaze held hers. It costs more than they expect. The weight of that statement settled between them. Shay didn't ask what he meant. Wasn't sure she wanted to know. They walked to the car in silence. The drive back through Seoul's sleeping streets felt different than the journey there. Heavier somehow, like the weight of what she'd agreed to was finally sinking in. She was married, living in a stranger's house, tied to a man whose world she didn't understand. He's right, you know, she said quietly as the city lights blurred past. About contracts not meaning anything. Chang-hee's hands tightened on the steering wheel. You think I'll break my word? I think you'll do whatever serves your interests. She turned to look at him. Like you have from the beginning. He was silent for a long moment, jaw working like he was choosing his words carefully. I could have let your brother burn, he said finally. Could have walked away from that house and let the fire take him. It would have been easier, safer. His eyes stayed on the road. But I didn't. That should tell you something. It tells me you needed leverage. It tells you I have lines I won't cross. He glanced at her briefly. Even when it would benefit me. Shay wanted to argue, but the conviction in his voice stopped her. She thought about him pulling Jamal from the flames, keeping him safe for 3 months, giving her this reunion when he could have dangled it over her head indefinitely. Maybe he did have lines. Maybe they were just drawn in places she couldn't see yet. The car pulled through the gates of the Hanok. Chang-hee parked, but neither of them moved to get out. What happens now? Shay asked. Now you live here, with me. He turned in his seat to face her fully. We maintain the appearance of a real marriage. You attend functions at my side. Learn enough Korean to navigate basic conversations. Let my world see that you're mine. The possessive edge in his voice sent. heat curling through her stomach. And at night? The question came out softer than she intended. Something dark and hungry flashed across his face. His gaze dropped to her mouth, lingered there. At night, you sleep in your own room, behind a locked door if that makes you feel safer. Her breath caught. After last night was your choice. His voice went rough. If you want it to happen again, it will be your choice then too. I won't assume. I won't push. He leaned closer, and she could smell cedar and night air. But if you do choose it, Shacy, understand. It won't be for appearances anymore. The air between them thickened with unspoken heat. I won't, she said, but her voice wavered, his mouth curved, not quite a smile but close, something knowing and patient. We'll see. You have a year to change your mind. He got out of the car before she could respond. Shay sat in the passenger seat, heart racing, trying to process the shift between them. The man who'd bought her cooperation with threats and contracts was offering her locked doors and choice. She didn't know which version of him was real. Chang Hee opened her door, offered his hand. She took it, let him pull her to her feet. They stood close in the darkness, the scent of cherry blossoms heavy in the air. Come, he said softly. It's late. You should rest. He led her through the quiet house, up the stairs to the second floor. They stopped outside her door, not his, she noticed, keeping his word about giving her space. Tomorrow we'll begin, he said. I have a meeting in the afternoon. You'll accompany me. To do what? To be seen, to be beautiful and quiet and mine. His thumb brushed her cheek, barely a touch, but it sent shivers down her spine. Just stand beside me and let them wonder what kind of woman could tame Kim Chang-hee. I haven't tamed anything. No. His eyes darkened. But they don't need to know that. He stepped back, creating distance between them. Professional. Controlled. But Shay could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands flexed at his sides like he wanted to touch her again. Sleep well, Mrs. Kim, he said quietly. Tomorrow your real life here begins. He turned and walked across the hall to his own room, closing the door with a soft click. Shay stood alone in the corridor, her brother safe, her future uncertain, and her heart beating far too fast for a woman who'd sworn to hate this man. She touched the wedding ring on her finger, solid, real, binding. But as she lay in bed that night, unable to sleep, she kept seeing the way Chang Hee had looked at her in the car, the careful restraint, the patient hunger. And she wondered if 1 year would be long enough to figure out if the man she'd married was her enemy or something far more dangerous, someone she might actually want to stay with. The thought terrified her more than any threat ever could. 6 weeks later, Shay barely made it to the bathroom before her stomach rebelled. She knelt on the cold tile, forehead pressed against the porcelain, and tried to remember what she'd eaten for dinner. Nothing unusual. The same bibimbap Chang Hee's cook prepared 3 times a week, the same banchan she'd grown to love. This was the 4th morning in a row. She'd blamed stress at first, the strain of living with a man who watched her like she might disappear, learning Korean phrases that felt clumsy on her tongue, attending functions where his world assessed her with calculating eyes, the weight of playing a role that felt less like pretending with each passing day. But stress didn't make her breasts ache, didn't make her cry at Korean dramas she barely understood, didn't make her 3 weeks late. Shay's hands shook as she pulled the pregnancy test from its hiding place beneath the sink, purchased yesterday from a pharmacy 3 neighborhoods away, where no one would recognize Chang Hee's wife. She'd promised herself she'd wait, that she was being paranoid, that there were a dozen explanations for her symptoms that didn't involve. The test clattered against the sink. 2 lines, dark, undeniable, destroying every plan she'd made. She was pregnant. The wedding night came back in fragments. champagne making her brave. Chang Hee's hands gentle despite the hunger in his eyes, the way he'd whispered her name like a prayer against her skin. They'd made it to his room barely dressed, 6 weeks of tension igniting into something that felt inevitable. She told herself it was just once, just to sell the illusion, to make the marriage look real. She told herself it meant nothing. The lie tasted bitter now. A knock at her bedroom door made her jump. "Shacy, are you unwell?" Chang Hee's voice, concerned, too close. She shoved the test into her pocket, splashed water on her face. "I'm fine, just give me a minute." Silence, then. "I'm taking you to see Jamal today. The doctors say he's strong enough to leave the facility for a few hours." Her brother. God, what would she tell Jamal? "I'll be out soon," she managed. His footsteps retreated. Shay looked at her reflection, pale, terrified, a woman who'd signed a contract for 1 year of pretending and now carried a child that made everything real. She pulled the test from her pocket, stared at those 2 lines that changed everything. In 11 months, she was supposed to walk away, take Jamal, disappear into new identities, forget Kim Chang-hee ever existed. But the man who'd saved her brother, who taught her Korean over breakfast, who touched her like she was something precious even when he thought she was asleep, that man was the father of her child. And Shay realized with sudden, devastating clarity, she had no idea if she wanted to leave anymore. The real question was whether he'd let her go when he found out, or if she'd just handed him the one piece of leverage that would bind her to him forever. She'd gotten better at reading Chang Hee over 6 weeks of marriage, the way his jaw tightened when business calls went poorly, how his hand found the small of her back in crowds, possessive and protective, the rare smile that transformed his face when she butchered Korean pronunciation and refused to give up. But today, driving through Seoul toward the facility, she couldn't read him at all. He kept glancing at her, something unreadable in his dark eyes. "You're quiet," he said finally. "I'm fine." "You said that earlier, through the bathroom door." His hand moved from the steering wheel to her knee. Warm, grounding. "You're not fine. What's wrong?" Everything. Nothing. The entire world had tilted sideways and she couldn't tell him why. "Just nervous about Jamal," she lied. "We haven't seen him in 2 weeks." Chang Hee's thumb traced slow circles on her knee, the touch absent-minded, familiar. When had that become normal? When had the steadiness of his hand become the thing that kept her world from spinning apart? "He's doing well, asking to leave the facility, actually." A pause. "I've been considering bringing him to the house." Shay's head snapped toward him. "What?" "He's strong enough now, and keeping him isolated." Chang Hee's jaw tightened. "It's cruel. You should have your brother close." The casual kindness of it broke something in her chest. "Why would you do that?" He glanced at her, something raw flickering across his face before the mask settled back. "Because you miss him, because he's family." His hand tightened on her knee. "Because making you happy has become important to me." The confession hung between them, unexpected and devastating. Shay couldn't breathe, couldn't process this dangerous, complicated man admitting she mattered to him while their child grew in her womb, a secret that would change everything. "Chang Hee." "We're here," he said, pulling into the facility's parking lot. The moment shattered, but his hand stayed on her knee for 3 heartbeats longer than necessary before he pulled away. Jamal looked better, stronger. The scars were still there, they always would be, but color had returned to his face, and he moved without wincing when he hugged her. "You look different," he said, studying her face. "Are you okay?" The question hit too close. Shay forced a smile. "I'm fine, just tired." Her brother's eyes narrowed. He'd always been able to see through her. But Chang Hee appeared in the doorway with coffee, and Jamal's attention shifted. Still wary, still protective, But something had softened between them over 6 weeks of daily visits, of Chang-hee proving through action, not words, that he meant what he'd promised. They spent an hour talking, planning. Chang-hee explained the security measures for bringing Jamal to the house. Her brother argued, negotiated, finally agreed when Chang-hee promised him his own space, his own freedom within the compound's walls. Shay watched them, these two men who defined her world now, and felt the weight of her secret pressing against her ribs. She was carrying Chang-hee's child. Jamal would be living under the same roof soon. And she still had 11 months left on a contract that promised her freedom. Freedom she wasn't sure she wanted anymore, to leave a man she wasn't sure she could. That night, back at the Hanok, Shay stood in her room, the room she barely used anymore, since most nights ended with her crossing the hall to Chang-hee's bed. Drawn by gravity she couldn't fight, she pulled out the pregnancy test, still in her pocket, still showing those two undeniable lines. She needed to tell him, but the words felt impossible. How did she explain that everything had changed? That the escape route she'd been counting on had vanished? That she was terrified of what this meant? For her, for Jamal, for the dangerous man she'd somehow started to trust. What if he used this against her? What if the gentleness of the past 6 weeks disappeared the moment he realized she'd given him permanent leverage? What if he didn't want a knock at her door? Then Chang-hee's voice. "Shacy, can I come in?" Her heart lurched. She shoved the test into her nightstand drawer. Yes. He entered, still in his dress shirt from the day, sleeves rolled to his elbows. He looked tired, beautiful, hers in ways she'd never agreed to but couldn't deny anymore. "You've been different today," he said, studying her with those two knowing eyes. Distant. "I'm just... don't." He crossed the room, caught her face in his hands with devastating gentleness. "Don't lie to me. Not anymore. We're past that." Were they? 6 weeks of living together, of learning each other's rhythms, of slow-burning intimacy that terrified her. Maybe they were. "I need to tell you something," she whispered. His thumb brushed her cheek. "Then tell me." The words stuck in her throat. She opened her mouth, closed it, felt tears burning behind her eyes. "Shay." His voice went softer, almost uncertain. "You're scaring me. What's wrong?" She pulled back, wrapped her arms around herself, put distance between them because she couldn't think when he touched her like that. "It's not, I don't know how to..." Her voice broke. Chang-hee went very still, watching her with an intensity that made her want to hide. "Did I do something? Did someone hurt you?" "No. God, no." She pressed her palms against her eyes. "It's nothing like that." "Then what?" He took a step toward her, stopped when she flinched, his hands clenched at his sides. "Shay, please. Whatever it is, we can..." "I'm pregnant." The words ripped out of her, too loud in the quiet room. Silence crashed down between them. Chang-hee froze. His face went absolutely blank, every trace of expression wiped clean. "What?" The word came out barely above a whisper. "I'm pregnant." Her voice steadied even as her world tilted. 6 weeks from the wedding night. He didn't move, didn't speak, just stared at her like she'd spoken a language he didn't understand. The silence stretched, endless and suffocating. Then he took one step back, ran a hand through his hair, turned away from her. Shay watched the tension coil through his shoulders, watched his hand clench into a fist at his side. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Say something, she thought desperately. Anything. A baby. His voice came out rough, shaken. He still wasn't looking at her. Yes. My baby. Yes. Another long silence. He braced one hand against her dresser, head bowed, breathing carefully like he was trying to steady himself. Fear clawed up Shay's throat. This was it. The moment he realized what this meant, the leverage, the permanence, Chang Hee turned, and the expression on his face stopped her heart. Not anger, not coldness, not calculation. Raw, devastating hope mixed with something that looked like fear. "Are you—" His voice cracked. He cleared his throat, tried again. "Are you okay? The baby, are you both healthy, as far as I can tell?" He crossed the room in 2 strides, caught her face in his hands, searched her eyes with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Tell me what you're thinking," he said, almost pleading. "Tell me what you want, because I need to know if—" He stopped, started again. "I need to know if you're planning to leave, if you're going to take my child and disappear in 11 months and I'll never—" "I don't know," she admitted, the truth spilling out. "I'm terrified. This changes everything. The contract, the plan. What happens when—" "Forget the contract." The words were immediate, fierce. "What?" "Forget it." His thumb traced her cheekbone, his touch unbearably gentle. "You think I'm going to let you walk away now? You think I could watch you leave carrying my child?" His forehead pressed to hers. "Shay, these past 6 weeks, what's between us? It stopped being pretend a long time ago. You know that." Her throat closed. "You can't just—" We agreed to a lot of things that stopped mattering weeks ago." His hand slid to her waist, careful, reverent, like he could already feel the life growing there. "Stay, not because of the contract, not because of the baby, but because this is real, and you feel it too." Tears burned down her cheeks. "What if I can't? What if I'm not ready to—" "Then we figure it out together." He pulled back just enough to meet her eyes. "But I'm not letting you go without a fight. Not now, not ever." She should argue, should remind him about freedom, about the year she'd been promised, about all the reasons this was a terrible idea. But standing here in his arms, carrying his child, she couldn't remember any of them. "I'm scared," she whispered. "So am I." His voice dropped. "Terrified. Of being a father, of failing you, of—" He stopped, jaw working. "But I'd rather be scared with you than safe without you." And when he kissed her, soft and claiming and full of promises neither of them had signed up for, Shay finally admitted what she'd known for weeks. She'd stopped being his captive somewhere along the way, and started being his. But whether that meant she was brave enough to stay, to build something real from a marriage that started as a lie, that was a question she couldn't answer yet. All she knew was that, in 11 months, when the contract ended, the choice would be hers. And for the first time since she'd signed her name to that impossible deal, she had no idea what she would choose. Hi fam, thanks for sticking through to the end. Do you want a part 2 of this story? Let me know in the comments. See ya!